and thanks so much for joining us today. We've got a brand new podcast for you, brought to you by KORR Medical Technologies, and we're going to be talking about all things metabolism. I'm Dr. Mark Humbert, and this is my co-host, Dr. Cameron Garber. So today, let's talk VO2 Max. What is it? Why does it matter? And how is it important in helping us not just live a longer life, but to live a better life?
Well, so VO2 Max and VO2 testing in general is one of the most important measures that we have in terms of health, wellness, and really one of the best vital signs that we can measure in terms of longevity and how the quality of our life is going to be. And so I love VO2 testing, and there's so many different ways that we can use it. And so being able to measure the way somebody's metabolism is working, it's one of the most important things that our body does, honestly, is convert food energy into fuel for our body.
Like, wow, that we can do that.
yeah, it's really cool. And honestly, is one of the primary drivers of society. Food, we have jobs so that we can secure money to buy food and all of these things. And yet we rarely, if ever, measure that system of our body's ability to turn food energy into fuel for our body. And so that's essentially what VO2 testing is measuring the air that we breathe out so that we can tell how we're burning fuel from the air that we breathe out, which is pretty cool. We use oxygen to burn fuel inside of our body. And by measuring the difference between the oxygen that we breathed in and the oxygen that we breathed out, we can tell how many calories that we burned. And then when we look at VO2 as well, or VCO2 as well, so carbon dioxide, we can look at how many molecules of carbohydrate that we burned as well. So it's really pretty amazing that we can look at not only, how many calories we burned, but what types of calories we burned, fats and carbohydrates. And so really, really neat. And so that kind of sets the table for, by measuring those things, all of the other things that we can do based on that with VO2 and VCO2 testing. And so lots to unpack here on the episode.
Absolutely. So one thing that I just want to put out there, because people are always wondering, well, why is the VCO2 important, right? Carbon dioxide, why do we care about that? And you mentioned that a little bit. But I think understanding that when we break down any type of energy, it's getting converted to carbon dioxide and to water. And so when we're losing weight, we're literally breathing it out.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that people may not know. And so that's what the cool thing is that what's happening at a cellular level and what's happening at our lungs is actually reflective of how our body is using those different substrates, fat and carbohydrate. And so we can see that in that what we call gas exchange data. And so what people, like you said, are breathing out, breathing in, and that lets us know how their body's using those fuels. So let's dive in to exactly how VO2 can be used as a vital sign. Because, when we think vital signs, we're like, okay, heart rate, blood pressure, we're going to the physician, I'm going to get my blood work checked, let's see how my cholesterol is, see how my blood lipids are. Right? There's all these things that we're doing, and yet we aren't using VO2 as a vital sign, really.
Not like we should be. So you're right. Often we aren't using VO2 as the vital sign that it should be. Whether we're talking resting metabolic rate or VO2 max, both of those are such important measures in seeing where we're at currently in terms of baselines of metabolic function with our resting metabolic test. And then with our VO2 max, there's not a better measure of looking at our capacity for fitness, our current longevity trajectory, and not only longevity, but how our health span is looking. So not just lifespan, how long we're going to live, but how healthy we're going to be while we live those years. That's super important that we are measuring also, our vitality essentially. And so by looking at that, and the higher that number is, the more likely we are to live a healthy, long life. Super important.
Well, and because I think we're thinking more and more and more about health these days, which is amazing.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, that's always the question. But are we using what we know to actually architect a better life?
Right.
And the crazy thing and the cool thing about VO2 is that we've had data come in for years about how important that is and how tied to living longer and to avoiding a lot of the chronic diseases
Right.
And so we've got all the way even back in 1989, Blair put out a research article looking at cardiorespiratory fitness and found that people in the highest category lived way longer and had much lower risk than people in the lowest category. And even people that were overweight but were highly fit had a lower risk profile than people that were normal weight but unfit. And so, and even farther back, right? And we've had some more recent research coming in. I know, thinking of a study by, I'm totally going to mess up the name, Mansanger, something like that. But looking at, again, the cardiovascular fitness of a huge amount of people and how does it affect their mortality risk. So we know that it's as good of a predictor as many of those other things. Looking at things like smoking,
Smoke a
diabetes, right? All these different things, and that it's as good of a predictor as those things. And so just such a vital way to look at our vitals.
Right. Well, by looking at that, we can see that term all-cause mortality. So all the different ways that we can die. Not a happy thing to think about, but we can see that in all of the different ways that we can become ill, that having a high VO2 seems to reduce the risk of all causes of mortality. So of all the different ways that we can die, VO2 reduces all of them, which is pretty amazing. We've talked before, Mark and I, about how exercise is often seen as a poly pill. That if it were in pill form, it really would affect everything area of our life and would help us stay healthier, happier, all those things. And so measuring VO2 max, which is an overall measure of our fitness, really is a great way to see, are we taking that poly pill?
Absolutely. Well, and to understand what is VO2 telling us, our cells need oxygen to help produce energy. There's several different energy systems that we have, but that's one of the main ones. And so what that VO2 max tells us is that I'm really good at taking in oxygen and using it to fuel my metabolism. And so if we're having a disconnect there, on some level from taking the oxygen in to getting it into our cells, there's a disconnect. And so that's part of why this is so useful, both the VO2 testing and the RMR testing, because it can help us flag things early and then intervene. And so I think that's one of the most useful things is that, as we talked about before, so many of those other vital signs are very descriptive. They're telling us what's happening at a moment in time, but it doesn't always give us a good idea of what to do with that. And with the testing, there's so much that we can do with that, not just as a snapshot, but then what do I do next? Right.
So it has more of a prescriptive element to it that it really is important. So I was asked this all the time when I first started my clinic. I was asked why VO2 testing versus other technologies, DEXA scanning or BOD-POD or other like BIA, bioelectrical impedance analysis devices, things like that. Why did you choose to make VO2 testing the preeminent feature in your clinic? And really, all of those other measures are great and very, very helpful. And so no knock on those technologies or that information. It's simply that all of them just give me a snapshot, a moment in time that can give me some insight into, is what I'm doing for my health and wellness working? It's so helpful, but it doesn't tell me then what to do. It doesn't give me that prescription of, okay, now based on these results, here's what you need to do to change things. And that's what I love about VO2 testing, is it's not just a snapshot in time of here's where you're at, but also gives me great insight into what I need to do to switch things up so we can get that optimal result. So when we look at a VO2 test, we can look at designing better heart rate zones for people to train in so that they can train according to their body and their current metabolic systems, their current rates of burning fats and carbohydrates. We can help dial in how we fuel their body, how many calories they should be intaking. All those types of things are given to us by the insights that we derive from that resting metabolic rate test and the VO2 test. And so really, really important that we can now use that information in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Well, and like you mentioned, it's not just one thing. Again, VO2 max scores Great. We want to know that.
Super helpful.
How are we doing?
Yeah.
But it's incorporating all of the other information that we can get from metabolic testing as well. Like you mentioned, what are our heart rate zones? What is our resting metabolic rate? So we know how to fuel our bodies. I think that's often one of the biggest difficulties for people is it's like, how do I fuel myself so that I have enough energy for just the things that I need to do, for exercise, for doing the things that I love, and just to feel good. And so when we know some of those other things, and when we really understand how is my body actually using fuel, and how do I give it better fuel to work better, like that can be such a game changer.
Yeah.
And just really help people that are frustrated by their health, that are frustrated by their fitness, dial in and have such a great starting place for moving forward and building better health.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It allows them to work according to their body and where their body's at right now. So often we like to follow the latest fitfluencer and, this is how I got to have six-pack abs. And that worked for them and their body at that stage of their life. A 20-something, it may have a little bit different road to six-pack abs than a 50-something. And do we need six-pack abs at all and things like that? So if we can dial that into that person's body, their metabolism at this point in time, we're going to have a lot more success than trying to follow maybe different influencers and what their path to six-pack abs were. And so by individualizing that, we really can help people have better success and define what success looks like for them by giving them additional metrics that show progress, not just weight on the scale, not just the way my clothes are fitting, but sometimes we'll see maybe weight on the scale doesn't shift as much as we'd like, but their fitness numbers are really improving quite a bit. And that gives us a lot of hope and insight into, hey, changes are coming. We just have to let your metabolism catch back up to that. If it's been a while since somebody last exercised, it may take a while for things to catch back up. And so having those additional metrics really gives a lot more hope to a plan when you're working with somebody.
Totally, because we see that all the time, that there's changes going on within the body. We're just not necessarily seeing that reflected in how we look yet. And
Right.
so being able to give people that hope and say, like, your body is actually changing. So this is one of the crazy things, and this is a little aside, but exercise, going back to exercise's role as just this amazing poly pill. So especially for people that have metabolic conditions like diabetes, exercise is especially crucial. So one of the cool things about exercise is it actually allows our body to pull sugar into our cells independent of insulin. And so for people like that have diabetes that are maybe insulin resistant, that's actually a great mechanism to start helping control their blood sugar.
Yeah.
Also, as you and I've talked about before, muscle, right? As we're exercising, as we're building muscle, is a great metabolic sink. And so it's a storage mechanism for blood sugar. It's a storage mechanism for fat. And so being able to start making those changes is so crucial. And so I want to dive into, I'm going to have you give an example of what we can discover with metabolic testing in a second. But one of the other things that we can see is what's happening with your heart after you perform a VO2 max test. One of the things that we can look at is what's your heart rate recovery look like. Mm-hmm. And if that's pretty quick, then you're doing pretty good. But we found that if it's in that first minute after exercise, if it's 12 beats per minute or less, or in the second minute, I think it's 22 beats a minute or less, like there's greater cardiovascular risk. And so this type of testing can tell us a lot. But one of the things that you talk about is the substrate utilization, how that will so often tell the story of how people are living and how they're exercising. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, so that's one of the fun things where over the years I've seen thousands of tests at this point, and been able to look at a lot of different people in different phases of life, different exercise and workout programs and things like that. And for the most part, I can look at somebody's VO2 test and tell them their fitness story, like how they have been working out. Yeah, it really is kind of fun. And especially if I have the RMR test alongside it, it really gives me a lot of ammo for asking the right types of questions to identify what's going on here with this person. And so I can see, hey, it looks like you train this way, and maybe we need to switch things up. So a common example, I will say, is people that work out really hard. So they'll do, boots camp style classes or kind of HIIT style classes where it's a combination of weights and cardio together. And so we'll see that they'll be able to tolerate high intensities for a long time, but then their fat burn is really, really poor. They've found that they're getting injured a lot lately, and their metabolic rate seems to be lower than what they would suspect. And so when I see kind of this pattern in their numbers, I'm able to ask a few questions of like, how have you been exercising? Do you normally do like class-based workouts, group fitness style workouts where they combine cardio and weights? How did you know? Well, it tells me in the data, honestly.
The numbers don't lie.
Yeah. And then I can often tell when their fat burn numbers are really, really low. Have you been trying to lose weight recently? Yeah, I have been. How have you been doing that? Have you been cutting calories drastically? And when we see their metabolic rate and we would suspect it'd be like 15 to 1600 RMR, and we see like a 1,000 or 1,100 calorie RMR. And, how many calories have you been eating on a day-to-day basis? Well, I'm shooting for 1,000, but often I get less than that even. Okay, that makes sense on multiple levels, why they're not burning as much fat, why their metabolism is slowing down, why, they're having a hard time losing weight this time around and they've had a bunch of injuries. Makes a lot of sense. If you don't have the building blocks to stay healthy, if you've been feeding yourself too few calories to where we're seeing some of those problems keep popping up of your body holding on to calories, of injuries popping up, and big swings in weight where people will lose 10, gain 15 back. All of those are explained by the results that we're seeing in the test. And so really, really helpful to be able to kind of read their individual metabolism and kind of, I feel like a fortune teller sometimes, right?
Like, how did you know?
Yeah, how did you know? And it really is in the data. And so then we can say, okay, based on where you're at, what you have been doing, and kind of what your metabolism looks like right now, here's the changes then that we need to make. And so we add in some just slow, steady strength training. We add in a lot more calories and those types of things. And all of a sudden people can be successful again. And that opens so many doors and allows us to have so many conversations about how to help somebody live a healthy, full life without stressing and obsessing about every calorie that they eat. Even though we measure calories and take a close look at how somebody's calorie balance looks and things, I don't have people track calories. I don't have them calorie count or things like that. I feel like that can be detrimental. And so we do the testing to find out where somebody's ranges should be at and where they should be, but we don't necessarily have them micromanage their calories like that.
Yeah, which is so helpful because I feel like that is one of the difficult things about people sticking with fitness or sticking with change. Change is incredibly hard.
Right.
If we do it, anyway, but if we do it and we try to kind of overhaul everything and make these drastic changes and just dial into these minute levels, it can get really difficult. And so being able to give people the data, but also give them something to do with that and help them to develop those healthy habits and those healthy changes is so huge. And so it's just nice because we can see how to make changes to their health and fitness, how to see if they're overtraining, how to see if they're undertraining. Mm-hmm. And so just so many beneficial things in terms of helping people, again, live better lives. So we've talked about RMR a couple times.
Yeah.
Let's dive in a little bit more about what that is, what it means, and why it's a good number to know.
Yeah, so in terms of testing, RMR is the easiest test to do because you just take a nap. It's great. So a VO2 test, right, is usually on some piece of exercise equipment, treadmill, bike, elliptical, rowing machine, right? Whatever you prefer to exercise on, that's the test that I would do. Resting test, you just take a nap, which is nice. The idea is we want to find if you were to just chill in the chair or stay reclined all day long, how many calories would your body need just to keep baseline systems functioning? That's a really good vital sign to have as a baseline because it can tell us how your metabolism is functioning. And then if anything changes with that, we can see what that is attributed to. So let's say somebody comes in and they are hoping to lose weight, and they come in and their resting metabolic rate is 1,600 calories. We retest a few weeks, months later, and their resting metabolic rate now has dropped by like 30%, but their body mass has only dropped by about 5%. That to me would be a red flag of we've reduced their metabolic rate so much. Now their ability to lose weight is going to be a lot harder, and their likelihood of sustaining those changes is going to be way, way more difficult. So if we can try to match about 1-to-1 their reduction in percentage of body mass loss to their reduction in percentage of metabolic rate loss, that's pretty normal. Like when we have a smaller body mass, we'll have a lower metabolic rate. So people always ask, like, is my metabolism fast or slow? And I always tell them, it doesn't matter. It just is where your metabolism's at right now. And often what we see is the people that are the very largest humans have the highest metabolic rates because they have a lot more body to take care of. Even fat cells require calories to stay alive and functioning properly. And so just having a larger body mass is going to have a higher metabolic rate no matter what. Now we can slow things down even with a larger body mass, and that's where people often get into trouble. And so there's a whole lot of ways that we can, help to preserve that RMR as somebody's losing weight and keep that resting metabolic rate high, keeping a high protein load in our diet, making sure that we're doing heavy strength training. And then with our cardiovascular work, making sure that we're really well balanced in our cardiovascular work, that we're doing enough kind of zone 2 slow, steady work. And then the zone 4 and really zone 5 high intensity work is going to help preserve a high or a higher resting metabolic rate. And so having that balance within our fitness and within our diet and things like that, so that we're doing all the things that we can to preserve a higher metabolic rate, is going to make sure that our cells, so what we're measuring there is that our cellular health, that our cells are staying healthy enough to be able to function the way they should. And so if we're slowing those down, that means that there's changes in the mitochondria, that there's either a reduction in mitochondria or just their function has been detuned so that we can keep up with the number of building blocks that we're feeding our body. And so we really can do a lot to improve our overall health and make our weight loss journey not as difficult, or our weight maintenance journey, just our overall health, by dialing into what does my metabolism need right now and treating our body accordingly.
Yeah. Well, that's the fascinating thing, is that our bodies can kind of recomp, and you might not see a bunch of big changes in weight or things on the surface, but we're adding more muscle, we're getting more efficient. And I just want to dive back into why muscle is so important. So Herman Poncer, he's an evolutionary biologist, has studied energy expenditure for a long time, done a lot of really cool things. But in a big study, it looked at daily energy expenditure across the human lifespan. And we see that from, like, in the beginning of life, metabolic rate's higher. That makes sense. We're growing a lot of tissue. But from about 20 to 60, it stays relatively stable. And so that's one of the big things that people are like, oh man, I'm older, like my metabolism is just getting slower. And what we're seeing is that's just not the case. It's just that a lot of times people tend to start losing body mass. So they start to lose lean muscle mass and organ mass.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. Obviously, skeletal muscle is good. We want that. It does burn higher number of calories than fat, but actually not as much as our organs use. So our brain uses about 20% of our daily energy. It's 2% of our weight, 20% of our daily energy. That's crazy. Our livers, our kidneys, our lungs using quite a bit of energy. And so if we're restricting energy too much, our body kind of goes in alarm mode and it says, well, I need this. I need this to keep my organs running, to keep metabolism going, to keep myself alive. And so it's just really going to restrict to maintain those basic vital functions, because that's what our brain is trying to do, keep us alive, right? Can I keep this person going? And so understanding that and really looking at, again, changing our health as this longer term process so that it's not just this yo-yo back and forth, one and done, but that we really make measurable changes so that not just weight improves, but again, our risk profile for all sorts of smoke and diabetes, like you mentioned.
Diabetes, yeah.
And so understanding those numbers and being able to dial those in and see what's happening in our body in real time and manage those changes so that it's not just this drastic change in metabolic rate is so helpful, because that gets discouraging, right?
Yeah, big time.
And the other thing when we do things drastically is, again, alarm mode goes off in our brains and lots of things changes, right? Our biology and our psychology are intimately intertwined. And so take weight loss, for example, right? We increase our hunger cues, right? Things just look more delicious. We perseverate on when our next meal is. And so the body really is driven to have a lot of reserve, right? Because historically speaking, it was feast or famine. And so our bodies are kind of designed to mimic that in how we store our energy. And that's actually a really cool thing is, why don't you talk real quick about how good of a fuel source fat is and why that's actually crucial in how we move and exercise?
Yeah. So, Mark brought up kind of our ancestry, and for millennia, our body was driven by what keeps us alive so that we could have offspring and all these things, right?
All those things.
And so fat is this amazing fuel source, very high energy. So there's a lot of energy stored within each fat molecule.
What were you telling me earlier about the crematoriums?
Oh yeah, so that is a problem now, because as a population we've have a problem with overweight and obesity and things. And there are crematoriums that are having difficulties because of how much energy is being produced in cremating some larger individuals, that it's causing fires or other problems that they can't contain the amount of heat being produced. And so fat really is this amazing fuel source that our body has developed systems where we can literally store infinite amounts of now. There are TV shows that kind of prove that that people really can store unlimited amounts of fuel. At that same time, it's not very healthy for us to store that much added fuel on our body. But even very lean people, you're talking elite marathoners that have like 2 to 4% body fat, still have like 20, 30, up to like 60,000 calories worth of fat stored on their body.
Which is crazy.
The average American is walking around with 200,000 plus calories of fat stored on their body. So, massive reservoir of energy there. So really cool from a survival standpoint that we can store, weeks to months to, in some cases, multiple months worth of energy on our body for a rainy season. That being said, ideally, we're not doing that because starvation isn't really a thing in our modern society, at least not for the same reasons that it was several thousand years ago. It's more politically driven than it is food availability driven. And so we still have this mechanism, though, of being able to store calories for a rainy day. We just don't have as many rainy days where we need to rely on fat stores. And so by knowing your metabolism, you can better manage your fat stores. And so that's part of why it's such an important vital sign, is it tunes us into what is my metabolism doing so that I can take the right actions on a day-to-day basis that match my metabolism. And so from a patient management standpoint, it's really, really helpful to have. We often joke that it's a really good lie detector. Are people really following the program that we have set out for them? Because often we can see in the numbers, if things aren't changing the way we would expect, that maybe adherence to the steps that we've given them aren't really happening. And so really helpful to be able to have that lie detector, but also not necessarily have to accuse the person across the table from us. Instead of being across the table, what I like is that we can actually sit side by side and look at the data and blame the data for what we're finding and say, okay, what are some other ways that we can switch things up to make this more effective, instead of being like, yeah, you're not really doing it. And occasionally you do have to kind of be more upfront with people and more real and call them out a little bit. But for the most part, you can use the data as a conversation piece that helps inspire them, connecting to their why of why they really do want to live healthier and all of those things, and help motivate people. So all in all, one of my favorite parts about doing VO2 testing, and the data that we receive from it, is actually the conversations that we're able to have, that are very tough conversations, honestly, that we can make more human by being able to blame the data or just say, hey, look, we're doing all these tests because you knew that there was some things that you wanted to dial in. And so we're not giving you these numbers to beat you over the head with it and make you feel bad. But instead, we just want a realistic snapshot of what do we need to do for your body based on where it's at right now. And then we can move forward doing the right things instead of always being frustrated. I can't tell you how many people have come into my clinic with tears in their eyes saying, I have tried everything. And they mean that sincerely. They really have tried so many things and listened to so many experts who are well-intentioned, who are often even well-educated, some not. There's a lot of misinformation out there too, but that aren't armed with the right information about where is this person's body right now. And so even though they're well-intentioned and well-educated, they often don't have the right pieces of information to get the whole picture for this person. And when armed with that, we really can see success that maybe we haven't seen in the past.
Yeah, I love that so much, because that's what people are looking for, right? Yeah. I want to feel understood. I want to feel heard. I want to feel valued. And like my life experience actually means something.
Right, well, to validate. So that's another thing that people are looking for, is validation. And so when somebody tells me like, I've tried everything, and I can look at the data and be like, yeah, I actually can see that you have tried everything and that you've put in a lot of hard work. Like with your VO2 test, I can see that you're really good at suffering. You're really good at pushing yourself and beating yourself up. And that's what you've been told to do. So that's not your fault. It's not that so people will often say, oh, I've been doing it wrong all these years. No. It's not about wrong or right. It's about doing what your body needs right now. And so you haven't been doing it wrong. You maybe have been misinformed on what your body needs, but that's not your fault. And so it's okay. Now we know what your body needs and we can move forward. But you haven't been doing it wrong. Anything you've done for your health or fitness is always good. It's better than not doing anything.
Yeah.
But it may not have been matching up your fitness effort with your fitness goal with what your body needs right now. And so being able to balance those kind of that three-legged stool of what am I looking to accomplish? What does my body need? And what am I actually doing to get that done is a difficult balance. And VO2 testing really does open the door from both the exercise side of things and the nutritional side of things to making those things match up and finding that balance.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the fact that is just, it's tied directly to our metabolism, right? What's happening in every cell of our body.
Right.
And so knowing that, it just helps us to, like you said, develop a plan specifically for that individual. And we're not relying on estimations or predictive equations. We're seeing what's happening real time with your body so that you can make real changes that last. And that's so powerful for people.
Yeah.
And again, we're finding more and more that all sorts of chronic diseases, being able to understand these things is so helpful. Things like Alzheimer's, things like diabetes, things like heart disease. Understanding metabolism and knowing how to modify that in a healthy way can just be absolutely life-changing. So we worked with an individual who had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
And just by making some simple changes to his health and fitness, reversed that, lost quite a bit of weight, and just changed the quality of his life.
Right. When it's the thing that eventually led to his father's demise. His dad died fairly young. And it led to a bunch of other of his family members. They all have this tendency to have this fatty liver disease. And so fun, honestly, to see him be able to make meaningful changes in his life, his lifestyle, his fitness efforts, his diet and nutrition. He voluntarily gave up alcohol, which was really interesting to see as he made that choice. That wasn't something we pushed or pressured. As he was just evaluating different choices and stuff, and the changes that made, and other changes that he made with his fitness and exercise, just made in his overall quality of life, his relationships, his funny enough, his wife wanted to meet us right after that. She was like, who are these people, and how do I get some of this, because of the changes she saw, not just in his health, but in his overall quality of life, his outlook on life, his, so many other things. And so it was just so fun to see how just these metabolic numbers, that really it's a fairly easy set of tests to run, that within under an hour you can do both the resting and exercise tests and get great insight into somebody's health. And that with the insights derived from that we were able to build a whole program that helped him have so much success in all facets of his life. He was even enjoying work more.
Which is wild.
Yeah, which is wild. And so it's just such powerful information to use as a vital sign for somebody's health that will allow them to make changes that really are meaningful in all facets of life. When we talk all-cause mortality, we're talking literally every physical ailment that you can have, right? Every single physical ailment you can have is reduced by having a high VO2 max and by treating your body the way it was intended to be treated. And we just don't know what that is because everybody's body's different.
Yeah.
And so getting tested allows us to really individualize that. That's such a buzzword right now in healthcare, is the individualized programming, the individualized healthcare that we can make very specific to a single person. That theme is coming more and more in medicine, that we can individualize that. And what a better way than to find out exactly what's going on with your metabolism so that we can dial things in for your body specifically.
Absolutely. And the amazing thing is that this technology is more accessible than ever.
Right.
Early on, it really wasn't. Huge metabolic carts, took up tons of space, just wasn't really feasible, and was so cost prohibitive that it just was really only used in research studies and the like. But now it's very available, it's very compact and highly accurate. And so anyone really can get this testing, and anyone can benefit from this type of testing.
Right. The technology has improved so much. The cart that I use, the KORR Cardio Coach, is the cart that I use. I love it because it's self-calibrating. I can literally go from device off to running a test within 3 minutes, which is awesome. I once did 42 tests in 2 days. So I went to a fitness
Which
conference.
is insane.
And I hope to never do that again because I lost my voice. It was so much talking. But the fact that I could do that, the technology has just improved so much to where I could run back to back to back to back tests. And the hardest part was just cleaning everything to get ready for the next test. And so cool, though, that I could give people meaningful information that quickly, that readily, and that the testing was so easy. So the technology has improved to where, historically it's always been the word that this type of testing was only done in labs and research facilities at the university and things. And now it can be done in clinics, health clubs, gyms. It really can go to the masses. And so that really has changed the world of metabolic measurement to where we can give it to the everyman, where really anyone can have access to that. And so that's honestly part of my mission, is I want to evangelize VO2 testing and get that word out there that it can be done at the clinical level, at the gym level, and we can give people real information about their health and wellness that can help them not only get a better snapshot of, am I going to live long and healthy, but also, can I do the right things for my body right now to help me get to that place where I can live long and healthy? If I'm not there now, what do I need to do? This helps give me those steps for being able to get there.
Absolutely. Like we said at the beginning, it not only helps you live a longer life, but to live a better life. And that's from Olympic athlete all the way down to someone who's just starting to exercise again.
Right. If it's been a few decades, it's okay. Let's get started with a VO2 test and get the ball rolling. That's a common thing people always ask. Do I need to get in shape before I do my VO2 max test? Or like, I want to get in shape first so that I get better numbers. And it's like, no. That's the whole point.
We're using this too.
Yeah. We want to, when you're trying to get in shape, the reason why you've tried to get in shape so many times and then had to hit the reset button is that you're not doing the right things for your body. And so injury, illness, fatigue, and just lack of compliance winds up happening because you're not doing the right things for your body. So no matter how out of shape somebody is, let's start with the test so that we know what's the right way to help them get in shape. So, like Mark said, if you're starting with an elite athlete or if you're starting with somebody that hasn't exercised since the Clinton administration, it's all going to be okay. We can test that person at their level and then see from there what we need to do to build the right program and help them get the right things out of their health and fitness.
Absolutely. And to just see this make it into people's regular testing, right? You're just getting a yearly VO2 max test.
Yeah.
That would be huge, right? And that's what we would just love to see happen and just make it more accessible. So awesome. Any final thoughts?
Well, if you're worried about VO2 testing, if you'd like to do it, but you're worried about, I don't have the knowledge or the skills or whatever, like, follow, subscribe, all those things, because that's what we're going to be talking about on this podcast. So we're really excited to dive deeper. We've only just scratched the surface of things that you can do with this. I'm thinking of we haven't really hit on zone 2 training, how to dial in HIIT training, how to, the nuances of nutrition and all kinds of other topics. We're going to be bringing on guests and other things that are experts in different ways to use this technology. So, most of how I've talked about it today is based on my experience and the way I use it to help people. There's so many other ways as well. And so, we're just scratching the surface today. And so if you're interested in this, definitely follow. But it's actually not as far out of your reach as you might think. The administering a test is very, very simple. And you really can learn how to interpret and understand the data very quickly. And so don't let that be a barrier to you if you're worried about starting, if you're worried about what do I need to do to get into the testing. It's really, really simple. And so with a metabolic cart, you really can use any piece of fitness equipment you can imagine. I have tested on every piece of, even an underwater treadmill, upper body ergometer, so an arm bike, all kinds of things. You can test on any piece of equipment. So know that the barriers to entry are less than you think. And like we said, the technology is improved and all those things. So if you're interested in doing this and think, maybe someday, make sure to follow, because we'll help you find that it really is closer than you think to be able to do that where you're at.
So one of the nice things is that KORR actually has a facility finder on our website.
Right, yeah.
And so you can go in there, put in your address, and find a facility right near you. So this testing is very accessible. You can find it super easily.
We actually use that a lot in the clinic. If we've got somebody that is joining us from outside of the state that wants to have us coach them, we'll often refer them to a facility in their area and send them the testing protocols that we use so that they can send us back the information. So it really is helpful to be able to reach anybody anywhere.
Well, and I think it takes some of the stress out of it. And where am I going to go? It's just, hey, go right here and find a place near you.
Yep.
Thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully that was helpful information for you. Like Cameron said, we just barely scratched the surface today. And so if you're interested in more content like this, remember to like, follow, subscribe. We're going to continue to dive deeper and hit a bunch of those other topics. So look forward to that, and we'll see you next time.